Hi, I'm Ellen Silva, and I'm here today to demonstrate how to create a special feature of my latest glove design, a fourchette between each of the fingers. I'll also demonstrate two methods of casting on the stitches between the fingers, and you can use those methods for any glove with cast-on stitches joining the palm and the back of the hand. But first, what is a fourchette? Let me show you. A fourchette is a small band of fabric that joins the front and the back of the hand and runs between the two fingers. In this case, let's see if we can't open this up so you can see it a little bit better. The fourchette is just a few stitches wide and just a few rows long, but it sure makes all the difference in the fit. It creates a U-shaped join between the fingers instead of a sharp V shape, and I think they make all the difference. So let's get started. I'm going to start by demonstrating a cast-on that I find to be very useful when you want to work in both directions away from the cast-on. This cast-on is called the open provisional cast-on, and you can work it either over a piece of waste yarn, or in this case I like to work it over a short circular needle cable. It's especially helpful to use a short cable when you are casting on just a few stitches as you would for a finger of a glove. Basically, all you end up doing is working knit stitches and yarn overs, and I'll show you how that's done. Let's pretend this is the hand of our glove. We're getting ready to create those fingers, so we've worked our palm and we're up to the point of fingers. I've got the stitches all set up here, ready to work a finger. These stitches will be used in the finger. They're on the outside edge of the glove. The remaining stitches I've got held on another spare circular needle. Love using circular needles as yarn or as stitch holders because they make it so easy to move the stitches around afterwards. Like I said, I love using these little short circular needles, and I'm just going to anchor one end right down in the fabric, right at the point where I want to cast on stitches across the gap between the back and the front of the hand. I'll need another needle here, and with that I can start working my cast on. I've got my cable here crossing the gap. I've got my working yarn ready to go, and let's get started. So first I go underneath the cable. I wrap my yarn, bring up the stitch, and just like that I have one stitch cast on. Then I work a yarn over. That's two stitches cast on. Go back under the cable, wrapping my yarn again, coming back forward, and you can see 3 stitches, one more yarn over, and we've got 4 stitches cast on. And at this point I am ready to start working my way around the circle. Let me grab my other spare needle. Don't lose that yarn over. Make sure you keep the yarn coming back over the top of your needle, and you can get ready to start working the very next stitch in your glove. I gotta get that up there a little bit. This is a point where as you work this first stitch, give it a good tug. Tighten that up, and we can just slip that off and keep on knitting. After I get this first needle knit, I'll show you what I'm going to do with the end of that cable needle that's flipping around here. So this is the one the cable that we cast on over, and now I'm just going to tuck it also down into the fabric, get it out of the way while I continue to knit in the round. You can see I'm all set up here to knit my finger in the round, and we'll show you how it looks working across that cast on. These are still some of the stitches from the hand. Oops, get that through there. There we go. And now I've worked up to the cast on. I'm getting all tangled here. Sorry about that. Here we go. Okay, I'm up to that cast on. Grab that working yarn. And we're ready to start knitting across the cast on. It looks pretty loosey-goosey right now. You see big sloppy holes, but those will disappear as you work, and any looseness that you're not crazy about, you can adjust the stitches a little bit as after you've got the finger knit. It's not really a problem. And we just keep working on around the finger. You can see we have a nice tight little setup of stitches to keep working around the finger, and I'm going to do just that, and then I'll come back to you. All right, as you can see, you could keep knitting a tube for your finger, or go ahead and bind it off for a fingerless mitt, whatever you wish. And I am ready now to work the fourchette that will connect this finger to the next finger. I have prepared the stitches already as well. I've put the stitches for the next finger and the fourchette between them onto 2 double-pointed needles, 6 on each as per my imaginary pattern. The remaining stitches, as before, remain on the spare circular needle. And we can see the circular needle that I used to cast on over here on either side coming down, and in the middle we can see those cast on stitches. And look at this, we have 4 stitches already on the needle coming back in the other direction. Now if we look carefully, 3 of these stitches arise from between the stitches that we cast on. Here are the last 2 stitches we cast on, and this is the stitch coming out of them, the middle 2 stitches and the stitch coming out of them, and the end 2 and the stitch coming out of them. This stitch over here that's also on the needle is actually a half stitch in a sense. It belongs to this column of stitches over here in reality, the other half of it. We want to end up with 5 stitches, and so we have 4. We need to add another half stitch at this end, and that's pretty easily done. I'm going to remove this from its anchored spot. I'm going to take a careful look. I can see this stitch coming across, the bar coming across, and the leg that comes down from that is the leg that I want to pick up. I'm just catching that with that cable from the circular needle, and just like that I have 5 stitches. Now it's possible that when you tucked in your end of your needle, or if you were working with a piece of waste yarn, you may have, just in the way that you started to knit the next stitch, you may have already created this stitch. If so, great, you're set to go. Just make sure that you end up with 5 stitches. I'm going to free up the other end of this needle, and now it's really apparent that we have 5 stitches ready to go on this needle. Alrighty, I'm going to turn it around. The thumb will be over here, because when you create fingers, you start from the little finger and move across. So the thumb's over here, and I'm ready to work my next finger. I'm going to start on the right side of the gap, and let me connect in with another color of yarn, just so that it's very clear what's going on. Let me just leave the loose end hanging down in the middle. I need another fresh yarn. If you take a look here, you can see that this stitch is mounted backwards. Normally this leg would be in front, and in fact I want it to be in front, so I'm just going to change it around. You just have to be aware of that. Now that I have it mounted correctly, I'm able to start working my fourchette. I'm going to slip the stitch, and if you're worried that it's looking a little bit loose, and admittedly I am too, don't worry over much. I'm going to fix that when I get back to this stitch in the next row. And yes, fourchettes are worked in rows, not rounds. I'm now ready to work the next stitch. You can see that it too is mounted backwards with the right leg behind the needle. So instead of remounting that, I'm just going to knit it through the back leg, and that corrects the mount. as I go across. Oh, this stitch mounted correctly, so I can knit it as normal. The next stitch mounted incorrectly, again, a feature of that cast on, it flops the stitches around occasionally. And now I'm to the final half stitch, and that looks a little loose to me. So what I'm going to do is work it through the back of the stitch. I'm not ready to knit it yet because what I'm going to do is slip knit with the first stitch from the body of the hand. And that is the beginning of the fourchette. I now turn the work. I'll slip that stitch that I just worked as a slip knit. Keep everything pretty snugged up here. Keep everything pretty snug. And work across the stitches to that last stitch. And that last stitch, again looking a little loose, I'm going to work as a purl two together with the first stitch on this needle. I'm going to flip it around first, put it on my needle. Let's get these stitches down in place here, put it back on this needle, and now I can work a purl two together off of that needle. And that tightens up those gaps. Plus, I have this tail here. I can use that for a little weaving in at the end to remedy any gapping that remains. But that should take care of most of it. That's my second row of my fourchette. You can see 2 rows there. To work the third row, slip the first stitch, knit across. They're all properly mounted now, so I don't have to worry about that. And once again, I'm going to work a slip knit in the final stitch of the round. Now at this point, I'm ready to start working around the finger. And I'm going to knit across the finger stitches that I had set up on my double pointed needle. I'm now at the gap for the hand, and I will show you an alternate cast on that if you weren't crazy about the first one, I'll show you a different cast on that you can use to bridge the gap this time. What we're going to do for a cast on this time is a crochet cast on. It's a simple, expedient cast on, uses a little bit of waste yarn, takes a little more effort to pick up those stitches on the second direction, but not too bad. So start off by creating a slip knot. I like to add a couple slip stitches here just to give myself something to grab onto before I start the actual cast on. For the actual cast on, I pick up my spare double point. I have the yarn and the double point in my left hand. The yarn goes behind the double point, the hook goes in front, yarn over, and I pull up a loop through my chain. And I have 1 stitch cast on. I now put the yarn behind the needle again, repeat, yarn over through the chain, yarn behind, hook in front, yarn over, pull through, yarn behind, hook in front, pull through, and I've got 4 stitches cast on my needle. I then work a couple of slip stitches, and on that last one I just pull it quite tight. This means I don't have to end off my yarn, but it also keeps it from being disengaged. Here's my cast on stitches to bridge that gap. All I need to do is position my gap, which is right here. And I'm going to tuck that yarn down underneath just to get it out of the way. Pick up my working yarn again and my spare needle. And I can proceed to knit across those 4 stitches, covering the gap between the front and the back of the hand. Let's stop and take a look at what we've got here. We have created a 5-stitch fourchette that is currently 3 rows long. We can see those rows peeking through in yellow right there. We've knit across either the back or the front of the hand. It depends on which hand you're working on. We've knit across the stitches for the finger from the back or the front of the hand. We've knit across the stitches cast on to cover the gap between the back and the front of the hand. And now we have remaining the stitches from the other side of the hand that will create the other side of the finger, and one last stitch to go into the fourchette. That's going to be worked with the first stitch that has already been worked from the fourchette as a knit 2 together as we come around to it. So first I'm going to pause here and move this stitch over to this needle, so that will be a simple maneuver when I get to it. It's as simple as just slipping her over, and I won't be bothered by it at the point that I've knit up to it. You could, of course, do this when you get up there, but I like to have it ready and waiting for me. All right. So now I'll get my needles arranged here. I have those cast-on stitches in yellow that I'm working from, ready to knit onto the other side of my hand. And let's go ahead and get that done. This first one can be a little bit fiddly, but there we go. Got it. And as before, I like to make sure that one's snug, and even the next stitch, you want to make sure you give a good tug on. That helps prevent some of those gaps. 4 stitches from the back of the hand, or the front of the hand, depending on which side you're on, of course. And that leaves me with the fourchette stitch and the remaining stitch that's going to go into the fourchette to be knit 2 together. And with that, I am ready to knit the finger in the round as before. And I will continue going about doing that and show you where we get to in a couple minutes. All right, I've knit a little bit of the second finger, the yellow finger, and let's just take a moment and reorient to what we've got here. In between the 2 fingers, you can see the fourchette, 1, 2, 3 rows moving in this direction. They're connected to the front and the back of the hand with, on this side, slip knits, and on this side with, it was a purl 2 together for the first one and a knit 2 together for the second one, because we were working on different sides of the fabric. On this side of that second finger, we have that provisional cast-on that was worked as a crocheted cast-on, and we're going to release that now onto a needle ready to knit the last finger. I've already removed the stitches from the holder and put them onto 2 double-pointed needles in preparation for knitting that last finger so we can get right to it. So first off, I like to take that cast-on and pull it out a bit. That recovers any stitches that have drawn into the fabric, and you can see right off the bat there are 3 stitches. Can you see those 3 stitches? 1, 2, 3 right in the center. Those are full stitches, and on either side we have what I call a half stitch. There's a half stitch here, and on this side, and we have to manipulate that fabric a little bit again, you can see the half stitch here. Well, that's perfect. We want to end up with 5 stitches, so I am going to pick up, and I'm going to pick them up so they'll be properly oriented. I'm going to go through and pick up those stitches. You've got 5 stitches on the needle. Now with luck, if I did it properly, I should be able to undo this cast on pretty much in one fell swoop. There we go. And we are ready to knit the last fourchette and the last finger. I see here I've managed to drop a stitch in all the excitement. Let me get this baby picked up. There we go. I'm not sure how that happened. At any rate, we have stitches for the fingers on the 2 double points. We have stitches for the crochet in yellow on a double point as well, and we will start working from the last finger worked in the direction of the side of the hand. All right, we'll get our working yarn here. I'll work in a different color so you can see this last finger come to life. And again, I just like to put the end down in the middle of the tube. It's one less thing in the way. This is a fiddly enough process. Why make it any harder? And I just pinch that end between my finger and the fabric so that I can start to work. Alrighty, we're set to go. The first stitch, as before, first stitch of the crochet is slipped as if to purl. Then I knit the middle 3 stitches. And when I'm on the right side of the crochet, I slip, and I need to move over to the next needle, slip, knit. And let me pick up that free needle again and work back on this. I'm going to work the second row of the crochet. We're working from the wrong side. Slip the first stitch, purl, 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 and I'm going to have to purl 2 together here. I'm going to go ahead and twist this stitch just to tighten up that gap a tiny bit, and I'll need to move this needle down in place, slip that stitch onto that needle, and then I can purl 2 together. Alrighty, turn the work one last time and work the 3rd row of the crochet. Slip as if to purl, knit 3 stitches, and I'm going to slip, slip, knit the last stitch with the first stitch from the hand, and that has completed the crochet. Those are the 3 rows of the crochet. I'm now going to knit around the finger. Up to the last stitch from the hand, because remember, that needs to be worked into the crochet as well. That'll be that stitch right there. Oops, one more. And I'm left with 1 stitch. I'm going to slip that onto my needle so that I can get over to this crochet. Last time I set that up ahead of time, you recall. This time I'm just working it right in place. Knit 2 together. And once again, we are ready to work in the round and create the last finger. I'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll be right back. Here we've got the last of our little sample fingers. Obviously this isn't for a real hand with 3 fingers, but it showed all the techniques I wanted to show you. And I want to show you one last thing that you can do to neaten up these crochets. They are a little awkward to do, and that can result in some stretch stitches and a little bit of wonkiness. First thing I'm going to do is work on this first row in the new working yarn. You can see I have 1 great big stitch here and a little tiny stitch here. Those 2 are kind of okay, and there's a gap here. The end to that working yarn is on the right side, so I'm going to start at the left, figure out which way my yarn is going, and just using the tip of the needle I can tighten that first stitch up and loosen up that second stitch. And actually, I like them to be pretty snug, so I'm going to work my way all the way across that row, pulling the excess yarn out. See how tight that one is there. Till I get to the end. Here I am at the end of the finished yarn, and I can snug up that last bit and snug it down, and that's already looking better. If I'm not crazy about the size of this stitch, I can adjust it a bit with, it's in the second row, but I can still work some of that slack across the row and make sure the stitches are all equally sized. And that's looking better already. But what about these gaps in the yellow yarn? Let's take a look here. I don't have an end to work with, but I have other stitches that I can work that slack into. And all that will take is just, once again, working with the tip of the needle. One stitch at a time, or 1/2 stitch at a time actually, is the trick. I can get the slack worked into the center of that fourchette. Over here, I think I'm going to work the slack in this direction. This stitch looks a little bit tight. Ah, here we go. It's this one right here. Just loosen up those stitches on the side a little bit and tighten up the stitches in the middle, and that looks much better. Reviewing again what we did, we created horizontal fourchettes that connect the back and the front of the glove. They travel in between the fingers for just a few rows to create this U-shaped separation between the fingers, which much more closely mimics the natural shape of the space between the fingers. And that's what I love about this technique. I hope this video was helpful, and if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch. I'm Twinset Ellen on Ravelry, or you can leave a comment on the YouTube channel. Thanks. Bye.